Summer is rapidly coming to a close, and I'm sure like many of you, I'll be celebrating by watching Jaws in theaters for its 50th anniversary re-release. I mean, check out the sweatshirt. As someone who was but a twinkle in my father's eye when the original film was released, I'm excited to finally bear witness to this masterpiece on the big screen. But I felt like another way to celebrate is by looking at some of the films that Jaws inspired. Because let's be real, without Spielberg's classic, cinema just wouldn't be the same, let alone our water-based ones. Hey friends, I'm Tyler Nichols and thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to take a look at some of our favorite aquatic adventures in the world of horror. First is the movie that most of us will remember as the time we thought Sam Jackson was the lead, only for him to get yoinked into the water like he owed that shark money. Like many, this movie will always hold a special place in my heart. So join us for the insanity of Deep Blue Sea. Then we're looking back at that time that Blake Lively didn't try to take over a movie and instead was content just surfing, until a massive shark shows up and decides it wants her for lunch. This is The Shallows. And while it's not technically a shark film, this one was absolutely inspired by Jaws and is one of the best ripoffs you could ever hope for. So we'll join Andrew Hatfield as he tells us what the deal is with 1977's Orca. So grab your surfboard, stay away from the edge of any water with lurking sharks, and let's see who the true apex predator of the ocean is, as we dive into some of our favorite water-based horror films. Imagine being an actor, showing up to work for the day, and suddenly there's 3 tons of water rushing towards you, threatening to drown you and your fellow castmates. Well, that's exactly what happened to the cast of Deep Blue Sea. So the next time you watch the film, just know that these people are legitimately running for their lives, narrowly avoiding a tragedy. But like any good shark movie, its behind the scenes is nearly as interesting as the film itself. So let's look at the fates that were changed, the actors that had to be fought for, and the chaos of having a jet engine and a mechanical shark, as we dive in to what the f*** happened to Deep Blue Sea.
She screwed with the sharks, and now the sharks are screwing with us.
Nightmares have been an inspiration for many a horror film. But picture seeing a tragic shark attack and being unable to shake it, waking up in the middle of the night terrified of the image of sharks coming towards you in a confined space. Thankfully, screenwriter Duncan Kennedy was able to parlay that into a script called Deep Red that Warner Bros. Bought in 1994. Apparently, he wasn't aware of the famous Italian giallo, but there wouldn't be movement on the project until director Renny Harlin joined, with Wayne and Donna Powers being hired to rewrite the script. For final rewrites, Akiva Goldsman was brought on to smooth things out further and took the script in a more alien direction. By this point, the title had changed to Deep Blue Sea. Kennedy claims that the basic structure of his script remained the same, but there were elements from every screenwriter who did revisions. The basic story follows a scientific research station that is using mako sharks to help find a cure for Alzheimer's. But an unintended side effect is that the sharks actually get smarter, which is all fine and dandy until the sharks fight back, flood the facility, and start going after the humans one by one. It had all the makings of a summer blockbuster. Harlan was actually a risky hire, as he hadn't had a commercial success since 1993's Cliffhanger. Because of this, Harlan knew how important it was for Deep Blue Sea to find an audience, so he knew unpredictability would be on his side. He didn't want the audience to know who would live and who would die just based on the casting, so he went for more unknowns. Thomas Jane hadn't quite stepped into the shoes of the Punisher, so he was perfect for the role of shark handler Carter Blake. Michael Rapaport had appeared in bit roles, and his stand-up comedy experience really lent itself to comedic relief Tom Scoggins. I mean, just look at this behind-the-scenes interview.
It's real sharks killing the actors, and that's never been done before.
Saffron Burrows plays the scientist who makes the shark smarter, Dr. Susan McAllister, whose fate would change during test screenings. Then, for recognizable actors, he's set to kill each and every one of them off, establishing to the audience that no one is safe. And there was no one bigger than Samuel L. Jackson, who would have the most memorable death in the entire movie.
We're gonna seal off this.
His character Russell Franklin had actually been made specifically for him, after Jackson's team turned down the role of preacher, not wanting him to play a chef. Though there was one actor who got shortchanged with all of this, Ronny Cox. Most of us probably remember him from RoboCop, but he actually appears at the beginning of Deep Blue Sea as Russell's corporate boss. But due to the edit, he doesn't say a word and instead just sits there as Russell stands over him. We even get a close-up to further make us go, why is Ronny Cox here and completely silent? Quite a tragedy given what a villainous role Cox can pull off.
Beating time.
Harlan had to fight with the studio to get his choice for Preacher hired. Thankfully, the studio lamented and LL Cool J was brought in, providing a bit of humor and gaining the audience's sympathies. Preacher was actually supposed to die early on in the script, but Harlan liked him so much that he kept him on till the end. Though his fate wasn't actually saved until test screenings were upset that his character was dying. The parrot that he constantly interacts with was actually two separate parrots, one good at flying and one that would sit on his shoulder. They were simply purchased in Mexico City versus getting a trained Hollywood parrot due to budget constraints. You can also see Rennie Harlan as one of the workers leaving for the weekend on the boat. Gotta love a director cameo.
The most brilliant man ever.
Pissing into the wind. How brilliant can he be?
Finally, Stellan Skarsgård was cast as Dr. Jim Whitlock, a very English name that really doesn't take into account his very Stellan Skarsgård accent.
2 months ahead of schedule. We're skipping 3 rounds of preliminary trials.
Original production designer Joseph Bennett did not get along with Harlan and said that he didn't have enough time to get the sets made, which is a big no-no when you're working on a studio's timeline. So despite him designing most of the film to that point, he was replaced by famed designer William Sandell, who came in as a favor to the studio. Sandell came up with many solutions and was able to get the film on track, allowing them to stay on their timeline. Shooting began in Rosarito, Mexico at the Fox Baja Studios. They actually used the same water tanks that James Cameron had used on Titanic, building their set on top of it, and it's quite impressive. But unfortunately, the first day of shooting was also chaotic, with one of the mechanical sharks malfunctioning and destroying the bodies of 4 different Panavision cameras. Talk about an expensive accident. The sharks were both practical and computer-generated, depending on the needs of the production. Hilariously, Harlan decided to make one of the sharks 26 feet long, since the shark from Jaws was 25 feet and clearly had to be outdone. Though the big mama shark was actually described as being 45 feet long in the film,
45-foot shark, you hit me.
Which is 3 times larger than the largest mako ever recorded. Ah, movie magic. And there was more than one Jaws reference in the film, as the tiger shark that Carter pulls the license plate from its mouth is the same plate that Hooper pulls from the shark's stomach in Spielberg's classic. Special effects designer Walt Conti, who had worked on both Free Willy and Anaconda, spent 8 months building the shark. The production built 4.5 practical sharks, 3 Gen 1s, and 1.5 Gen 2s. They were remote-controlled machines that weighed 4 tons and had 1,000 horsepower engines inside them. They were just as dangerous as real sharks. If you look closely during the scene where Jim Whitlock loses his arm, you can actually see that they did facial replacement, as it was actually a stunt actor performing the action. But actress Jacqueline McKenzie was actually in the mechanical shark's mouth for her death scene, as well as LL Cool J at the end of the film. I guess they weren't told about some of the shark malfunctions that had occurred during the production to that point. With water involved, the shoot was extremely tough, with Harlan calling it the most difficult experience of his life. And they even took the filming to the ocean, with Tom Jane actually swimming amongst real sharks. This was actually done at the end of production, just in case something happened during the dive. Ah, that's comforting. One of the most satisfying moments of the movie is when Dr. Susan McAllister meets her maker and proves that karma is real. But that wasn't always the case. In fact, the original ending actually had McAllister escaping her predicament and surviving to the end. Thankfully, test audiences balked at such a terrible character surviving when so many others were killed due to her actions. So Harlan went in and changed it. They did a quick 1-day reshoot at a tank at Universal Studios and did some quick CGI work to change her fate. Clearly the right decision. But according to rumor, no one told Saffron, and she actually found out at the premiere. The studio really made the most of LL Cool J's involvement, even using 2 songs of his, one of which was made specifically for the movie, and features one of the most insane music videos ever made. The score from composer Trevor Rabin also stands out and manages to avoid any John Williams parallels, and has a unique identity all its own. Deep Blue Sea released to theaters on July 30th, 1999, and brought in $18.6 million on its opening weekend. The film would end its run at over $165 million worldwide, making it a massive hit for Warner Brothers. Critics were more mixed, giving it a 60% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but the film has certainly reached cult status in the years since. Arrow Video put out an absolutely beautiful 4K of the film that is a must-own for any fan of the movie. We did receive 2 separate straight-to-DVD sequels in 2018 and 2020, and there's some dumb fun to be had with both, but neither reach the heights of the Harlan original and are more akin to sci-fi originals than big studio films. Given the genre's lack of quality, it's no surprise that Deep Blue Sea ranks amongst the best shark movies ever made. It's fun and is never lacking in memorable moments or characters. And that, my friends, is what the f happened to Deep Blue Sea.
Are you sure it was just 3 sharks?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's more like it.
Get out of the water! Get out!
When it comes to the many subgenres of horror, one with perhaps the biggest uphill battle is the shark thriller, or sharksploitation if you prefer. We can all debate what's the greatest slasher movie, the scariest haunted house film, the creepiest killer kid flick, but in the realm of underwater horror movies, there is no debate. The conversation begins and ends with Steven Spielberg's seminal 1975 blockbuster Jaws. Undeniably one of the best movies ever made.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
It'll be king of this admittedly lean subgenre long after we're all gone. But just because you can't unseat the king doesn't mean you shouldn't still give it your all, which is why this has been such an enjoyable, not to mention thriving pocket of horror cinema. Being devoured by a shark is always going to be a terrifying idea, which is why we still love soaking up these movies. While a debate can be conducted about which shark thrillers can even rise to the occasion of holding one of Jaws' smaller teeth, one film that came out not too long ago absolutely deserves to be in the conversation: The Shallows. The 2016 summer hit starring Blake Lively from director Jaume Collet-Serra, a sturdy, entertaining, self-contained suspense flick that gets the job done. The Shallows is surely to be one of the very first titles to pop up when the conversation turns to shark movies not named Jaws. But how did we get lucky enough in the first place to swim in its wake? Hold your seagull pal close and put on your wetsuit, or take it off if you prefer, because we're going to dive in and find out what the f happened to The Shallows.
No, there's a shark!
The Shallows began life as a spec script from writer Anthony Jasinski titled In the Deep. Screenplay landed on the 2014 Hollywood Blacklist, the compilation of best unproduced screenplays in town, but it wouldn't remain unproduced for very long, as by September 2014, there was a fierce bidding war over the script. This battle was being waged by most of the major studios, including Warner Brothers, Fox, and Paramount, but in the end, Sony's Columbia Pictures purchased the screenplay for a hefty sum. Or should we say chum? No, we probably shouldn't. Sorry. Cut to March 2015, when it was announced that In the Deep had a director circling, Louis Leterrier, best known at the time for directing Incredible Hulk and the Clash of the Titans remake. Apparently Louis had a take that, quote, knocked the producers out, and it looked for a moment like it was going to be a very good match. But only a few short months later, in the June of 2015, it was reported that he had dropped out of the project. The reason being that the budget that he was initially promised was drastically reduced, and In the Deep no longer resembled the film that he had signed up for only a few months prior. In short, the usual creative differences. With Leterrier out of the picture, Sony had to find a new captain to guide the ship. Only a few weeks after they lost Leterrier, Sony allowed Spanish director Jaume Collet Serra to climb aboard. The former commercial director was known to horror fans as the helmer behind House of Wax and Orphan, but at the time was best recognized as Liam Neeson's favorite collaborator, having directed Unknown, Non-Stop, and Run All Night consecutively for the star. Now he was returning to the genre that put him on the map. Albeit In the Deep was a much different kind of horror flick than his previous two. So now with that chair filled, the search was on for a star. A young woman who could hold her own against a killer CGI shark and carry the entire film on her shoulders, as she's practically in every frame of the picture. 2 months after Collet Serra had signed on, it was announced that Blake Lively was joining In the Deep. Although a scheduling conflict almost halted the plan because she was actually filming a Woody Allen movie at roughly the same time. But the conflict worked out, and the 28-year-old former Gossip Girl star officially signed on. Aside from the obvious appeal of being the main, hell, practically only actor in a thriller from a major studio, one reason Lively decided to headline the film was because her hubby, Ryan Reynolds, had similarly tackled a film that featured him in every single scene, Buried, which sees Reynolds spend every moment on screen inside of a coffin. Lively said at the time that Reynolds' turn in that claustrophobic thriller had inspired her to try her hand at a role that had her front and center the entire time. Buried had been a very challenging but rewarding production for Reynolds, so Lively was hoping she'd have as fulfilling of an experience on the shark film, and said shark movie underwent a title change sometime between Lively's casting and the start of production, as Sony was now calling it The Shallows. But the question remained, where was The Shallows going to be shot? It was obviously apparent that shooting the film on the actual ocean was not going to work. Just ask Spielberg how much fun that is. So the decision was made to shoot the majority of the film in a tank, with some location work being done on a pristine beach that would look for all the world like paradise. Originally, there was an idea to shoot The Shallows on a beach near Galveston, Texas, which is where the main character is from. But for safety reasons, that idea was squashed. It might have been for the best, however, as the production eventually found their little piece of heaven in the form of Lord Howe Island, a 2-hour flight from Sydney, Australia. Lord Howe is a national park and ecotourism resort that's home to only a few hundred people, and many different species of bird and fish alike. So, at the very least, paparazzi was not going to be a problem. But the place is so cut off from human civilization that there's barely any Wi-Fi, cars, or any of the other standard necessities that one needs to make a major motion picture. Columbia Pictures had to bring almost everything that they required to this little speck of paradise without disturbing a single bird's nest, which naturally proved quite difficult. Because of a restriction on cars or buses, most cast and crew had to bike or walk to the set every day. Add to that, Lord Howe has an unpredictable microclimate, forcing the production to hope and pray that they'd have sunny skies to work with for at least a while before a storm suddenly burst upon them, disrupting filming. The production even brought in their own rock, the one that Blake finds herself stranded upon for the majority of the film's runtime. They had to wait approximately 8 days to plant it in the ocean because the water was just too rough and dangerous. When they finally had the all clear, the rock was held to the bottom of the floor via cement blocks. Blake would be sitting on the rock for hours in the rough waters while the production got the shots that they needed, an experience that she eventually admitted was surprisingly soothing. The most difficult scene to shoot, according to the director, is one you might not expect. Before everything goes to hell, Lively makes the acquaintance of 2 friendly surfers who bob several dozen yards away. Thanks to the motion of the ocean, shooting this seemingly innocuous scene was a thorn in Jaume's side, because neither Blake nor the camera could stay still long enough to get the shots that they needed. Divers had to be dispatched to hold on to Blake as best they could to steady her, lest she float away into the sea, while grips had to hold the camera rig so it didn't get out of control. Naturally, once these difficult shots were completed, shooting went to a far more predictable arena, the giant tank set up at Village Roadshow Studios in Queensland. ironically where Colette Serra had shot House of Wax about 10 years earlier. Approximately 90% of The Shallows was shot in the tank, with Lively front and center for every scene. And no, there was no real shark used, not even a prop one. Jami later explained how it was never even a consideration to attempt to build a replica of a great white because it would have just been too difficult to work with, even within the safe confines of the tank. So a CGI shark was painstakingly crafted using designs and drawings based on real sharks. And because the shark in the film is a female, it's bigger and more territorial, hence more deadly. Apparently sharks get a little kinky while mating, which is partially why the shark is covered in so many scars and gashes. That's just what happens when you're a single lady shark looking for a baby daddy. Of course, there's one more central character to address: Steven Seagal, the injured but communicative bird that Blake's character has as a neighbor during her harrowing plight. The bird, whose real name was Sully, was from a seagull sanctuary in Australia and quickly became known as the Marlon Brando of birds. He even had understudies, aka other seagulls on call in case the producers weren't getting the goods from him. But turned out he was a true pro and never needed a stand-in. Though it does sound like working with him could get quite contentious. During the scene where Blake's character fixes his busted wing, Sully really did bite down on the actress's finger, and apparently sometimes he was even known to lash out at her when he was feeling a bit discontent. Hollywood is filled with stories about actors who didn't get along off set, but made good movies together, and you can add The Shallows to that list. And that wasn't the only injury that Blake sustained. In fact, she cracked her nose on the buoy that she latches onto in the film, which resulted in a real bloody nose captured on film. She even told us about it during an exclusive interview back when the film first came out, which our wonderful writer Eric Walkuski was lucky enough to conduct.
It was a painful shoot, and I actually cracked my nose. There's a scene where I'm swimming up under the buoy and I hit my nose and I come up and I have a big bloody nose, and that was real bloody nose. That was not scripted. It
and they're like, "Don't cut, keep it going."
Well, I kept going because I thought either I'm gonna pass out right now or I'm gonna keep going and this is gonna be awesome, and at least my war wounds are going to be shown.
When all was said and done, The Shallows shot for around 3 months in Australia, with some pickup shots done in LA afterwards. Blake Lively apparently discovered that she was pregnant with her second child toward the end of the shoot. Not that you'd know it thanks to the intense endurance training that she had to go through to get into surfer shape. The Shallows opened on June 24, 2016, opposite Independence Day Resurgence to the tune of $16 million. Not at all bad considering that was also its budget. All told, the film grossed $119 million worldwide, making it a very profitable movie indeed. While as of this video, there hasn't been any direct-to-VOD sequels, there is a 2025 remake courtesy of China, which boasts a mostly similar story of one woman's fight to outlast a toothy enemy. Only it has a crazy Groundhog Day element and VR. This thing looks insane. So back to our original discussion, while The Shallows is no Jaws, where does it sit in the best shark movies not called Jaws list? Let's say it's bobbing near the top, offering a meat and potatoes piece of entertainment that forces the viewer to contemplate how they'd fare in such a situation. That's worth a bucket of chum or two at the very least.
Happy 50th anniversary, Jaws. You were undoubtedly one of not only the greatest summer blockbusters of all time, but a landmark horror film that lives on in both its quotable lines and music that nearly everyone will know when it's heard, but also its legacy.
From the best-selling novel, Jaws.
While we have covered the series nearly to death in almost every fashion possible, I don't think we've looked at what it did for the movie world as much as we could. While there are knockoffs that try to directly capitalize on the very name that built the foundations, looking at you, Cruel Jaws / Jaws 5, there are so many wonderful copycats that were produced that live on in their own special ways. My plan is to cover a few of them over the next couple months in the summertime, and while there are many to discuss, either on the merits of so bad they're good or genuine uniqueness, I have a few in mind that I think deserve a spotlight for being way better than they have any right to be. Orca has way more going for it than you'd expect from a movie just made 2 years after Jaws that was also made to directly capitalize off the success, but here we are in this very video. Let's look at why Orca is a top-tier clone movie and one of the best animal attack flicks ever put to celluloid. These are the black sheeps of Jaws ripoffs. Imagine you are Italian screenwriter Luchino Vincenzoni. You're already an absolute legend for writing For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for Sergio Leone, and you were woken up in the middle of the night by mega producer Dino De Laurentiis. He's just seen Jaws on the big screen and wants you to come up with, quote, a fish that is tougher and more terrible than a great white. His brother directed him to Killer Whales, as Luchino was already a big fan of sea life and found the novel Orca, written by Arthur Herzog, and decided to adapt it into a movie that was designed to rival and even better Jaws. Since Jaws was also adapted from a book for its big screen debut, this was kismet and the script was written. Since it was going to be an international affair, an uncredited script doctor for dialogue was brought in with Robert Towne working on said dialogue. Towne worked with Jack Nicholson, Roger Corman, and Sidney Pollack, among others, and definitely adds in a little flair to Orca. Helping Vincenzoni with the script would be Sergio Donati, who would be responsible for Once Upon a Time in the West and Duck, You Sucker, which is kind of the forgotten spaghetti western of its time. The pedigree for Orca is already way more surprising than you'd expect, but then we come to who would direct the project. Making it a full international picture, Oscar-nominated English director Michael Anderson was hired, following his work on Logan's Run and Around the World in 80 Days. The cast is also a fun one, with the two leads being played by original flavor Dumbledore himself, Richard Harris, who almost died multiple times doing his own stunts, and Charlotte Rampling. Harris never did any other movies even related to the horror genre, but worked with Sam Peckinpah in Major Dundee, Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, and was nominated for 2 Oscars. Rampling, an Oscar-nominated actress in her own right, has had a heck of a career which is still going strong into 2025. She has appeared in other horror films like Asylum from Robert Bloch and Amicus Pictures, as well as Angel Heart among her many genres and accolades. The rest of the cast includes Will Sampson of Poltergeist 2 and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest fame, and Bo Derek of 10, Robert Carradine, Keenan Wynn, and Peter Hooton, who, if nothing else, you need to check out in Night Killer, which is one of the most insane Italian horror flicks I've ever seen, all round out the cast. In terms of copying our friend Bruce, you have stand-ins for Hooper and Quint, although a Brody surrogate is missing. It does, however, follow a storyline that Jaws the Revenge would use years later, with the main oceanic terror seemingly targeting the human characters. Orca follows Nolan, an Irish fisherman who does odd jobs to pay the mortgage on his boat so he can return to his home country, as he hunts for a great white shark for an aquarium. The movie removes all notions of subtlety right away, as the music is We Have John Williams at Home, courtesy of Ennio Morricone, in its attempt to show a shark early. It also tries to prove that its animal is the real terror when an orca kills a great white shark when it attacks one of Nolan's crew.
Jesus, what did that?
Nolan sees this as an opportunity to go after a more valuable target in the orca, but instead of getting just a prize animal, he hooks a pregnant female, which results in the death of both mother and child. It's here where Orca transforms into something entirely different. While a lot of Jaws clones focused on environmental issues like the wonderful mega bear attack film Prophecy, Orca instead goes in a direction that is both hilariously unexpected and a bit ahead of its time. You see, when the male orca watches its mate and child die on a boat at the hands of Nolan and his crew, it turns into a seafaring whale John Wick, or the bride from Kill Bill. It is consumed with rage and revenge while also being hyper-intelligent, something the movie sets up well with a character introducing the species in general. The Jaws similarities extend further than just the basic outline too. While the movie's music attempts a Jaws light motif, it also has a little flourish like the orca's fin coming out of the water to identify itself, and even some of the characters being stand-ins for those in Jaws. This, of course, has just as much to do with the original author as the movie's writers, but it's still fun to note. Nolan is very much in the Quint role and even has a deeply saddening story to go with him. For Quint, it was the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, where many of his fellow soldiers were taken by sharks before rescue. Nolan, on the other hand, is mortified to learn that he has inflicted the same pain on the orca that someone gave him with his wife and child also perishing in an act of senseless violence. Richard Dreyfuss's Hooper is slightly recreated with the quote-unquote expert character, but in Orca, it's a Native American who understands the species and how to combat it based on his ancestors. A different type of expert to be sure, but an expert nonetheless. Further looking into the similarities, we find the local town wanting the menace dealt with. In Jaws, we have the shady mayor of the town wanting to keep the beaches open and the tourists happy so that money will be spent and the town will continue to elect him into office. Orca has the local fishermen being worried about an orca messing with the very ecosystem that they use to fish and their livelihood. The orca being out for revenge is one unique aspect, but then the film takes another turn. We are treated to slasher villain Orca for most of the remainder of the film. Not only does the orca get his own slasher type music, but he stares down Nolan multiple times in a similar fashion that Michael Myers would be standing outside Laurie Strode's window in between the family laundry. This whale is also seemingly an unstoppable killer, and we get proof of that as it stalks its prey one body at a time. The first victim of whale rampage is the first mate Novak, played by Keenan Wynn. He's an older sailor, but is dragged under the water by the orca without remorse. The orca then tries to turn the entire village against Nolan by rupturing an oil line and causing an explosion big enough to end their fuel supply, while also sinking several of their boats to cost them potential weeks of fishing. While Nolan understands the plight and anger of the orca and agrees to not kill the creature, Orca will not be stopped and nearly destroys his home while also taking the entire leg of Annie, played by Bo Derek, who's a crew member on Nolan's ship. This is just plain insult to injury for Annie, as her leg is already in a cast at this point. Nolan then decides that gloves are off and this whale must be stopped. The movie has a mean streak that lasts for nearly the entire runtime, and while the special effects shift from good to bad and back to pretty regularly good, you never really expect what's to come next. The crew stalk the whale into the Strait of Belle Isle, where it takes out the crew in order. The orca eats Ken when he leans over the side of the ship, Paul when he tries to take the safety raft to escape and is crushed, and even Jacob is crushed when the orca breaks the side of an iceberg and it lands all over him. We're down to just Nolan and Bedford when Nolan shoots the orca with a harpoon gun, but is then thrown against the ice to his death on the back of the killer's tail. What's left for our antagonist, or I suppose our hero depending on how you look at it? The whale drowns itself after getting its revenge. That's it. That's the end of the movie. I did not have that on my bingo card. The movie did make $14 million on its $6 million budget, but De Laurentiis was certain that it was going to outgross Jaws, while it would only amount to a minor hit and a forgotten gem in the long run. At one point, he even loudly shouted, "Why nobody like my whale?" Well, I do, Mr. De Laurentiis, I do. It's a fun and unexpectedly dark journey that is nearly impossible to tell what's going to happen next. You have a slasher killer whale and genuinely feel bad for the whale family from beginning to end. While there are nearly countless Jaws clones out there to choose from, Orca belongs at the top of that pile. While it never quite matches its over-the-top and great-looking poster, it will give you a good time and is honestly better than parts of the official sequels. Grab your harpoon gun and hunt down Orca yourself.
Look at him! Just look at him!
While summer has essentially come to a close, what films would you like to see us cover next summer? Because I sure as hell had a blast covering these. And if this still hasn't scratched your aquatic itch, make sure to check out our look back on the Jaws series, which you can find in the description. See you next time, friends.
Thank you! You're a vengeful son of a bitch!
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. joBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.